Greetings, friends. What is scientism? And why is scientism a problem? Well, firstly, we have philosophy, and I would say theology even comes before philosophy. But philosophy gives us the means to think rationally. It gives us the means to form valid questions, which can then be investigated by science. Science came out of philosophy. Science is a good thing, but it is good as a means to an end, and the end is determined by philosophy and I'd say theology. But science is also a way of exerting power over the material world. Science is largely concerned with the manipulation of matter. Many scholars point out the early historical connections of science with Gnosticism, alchemy, and magic. The idea of turning one substance into another, for example, or the idea of turning one kind of human society into another kind of human society. This is how we move into scientism. And remember, the Gnostics thought matter was base and that we had to escape from matter. That ties in with the scientific idea of controlling matter. Scientism is the worldview which dominates today, so this is very relevant. Scientism is not the same as science. Scientism is a religious worldview, and it gives science sacred power to determine how we should live, what is good, etc. Scientism is not ultimately rational. It only recognizes scientific knowledge as valid. It doesn't recognize that there could even be other forms of knowledge. Scientism is materialistic. It embraces Darwinism. It also reduces the world to a collection of data and statistics. Scientism, in some ways, is similar to evidentialism, although it's not actually consistently focused on evidence, which would be proper to the scientific method. Show me the evidence is the familiar mantra we hear a lot these days. Evidence is taken to mean empirical data, or at least historical documented evidence, and this becomes the only way to talk of knowledge. The fact that this ultimately collapses into solipsism, where nothing can be taken to be real outside your own mind, was already shown long ago by the skeptics René Descartes and David Hume. Scientism ignores this philosophical problem, and this is because scientism excludes philosophy, and that includes theology. Scientism posits miraculous events, like the universe creating itself out of nothing, or a bolt of lightning bringing dead matter to life. Ancient apes getting stoned on mushrooms and then developing a rational consciousness. And the fact that there is no direct evidence of these events occurring does not trouble believers in scientism, because they are not trying to be consistent or rational. They are interested in power. Scientism also rejects metaphysics. There is no transcendent reality, even though it makes use of that transcendent reality. We all use language, concepts, numbers, and to some extent logic, some more than others. These are examples of metaphysical realities. They're real, but we can't directly observe them. I mean, you can observe numbers in things you see, but you can't pick out a number and say, here it is, I've isolated it. Yet we would all agree that they are real. But in scientism, these can't ultimately said to be real things which have some existence beyond the physical. For example, eating would be described as a biological act. It would not be said to have any other dimensions in this worldview. There would be no spirit to be nourished. There would be no ritual to be fulfilled by eating with other people. Eating becomes merely the consumption of calories. Likewise, happiness becomes a matter of brain states. Happiness can be manufactured with drugs and dopamine and material objects. There is no spiritual dimension to happiness, not beyond the physical anyway. Scientism goes hand in hand with technocracy. The rulers are technocrats, meaning the scientists, the engineers, and the government officials who associate with them. In science, we would question these experts. We would not give these experts ultimate authority. But in scientism, we follow the experts' every command. For example, the Minister of Public Health in Canada is like the commissar. We often find that in scientism, the science itself suffers. We perform activities such as closing down our economies, making children wear masks, and these activities are not backed by science. People do not recognize logical fallacies like the appeal to authority or the appeal to consensus, meaning an expert said it, therefore we must accept it as true. That would be the appealing to authority, with basic logical fallacy, or everyone else is saying this is the case, or all the institutions are saying the case, this is the case, or I've never heard anyone say what you're saying. So this is appealing to consensus or the bandwagon fallacy. Originally, the ability to recognize basic logical fallacies like these would have been part of a scientific training. But in scientism, this kind of knowledge is discarded. Neither do people recognize the significance of the reproducibility crisis, where more than half of scientific papers cannot be replicated because all the people doing the research have become self-serving. Well, not all of them, but it's gotten to the point where, like, it's all tied up. The biases and the money and getting approval is now more important than giving honest reports of the truth. But people can't recognize how this reproducibility crisis could be a problem. It's not really built into the system. You can't even ask questions about it. You can't even look at the theory, which is informing the science, and question the theory. You can't even think that would be a question in this system. You would get a blank stare. This is why people like Neil deGrasse Tyson don't like philosophy, and they don't like philosophy of science especially. Now, there obviously is a lot of valid science in our society. We've seen that lots of things continue to get better, like smartphones. Better in some ways. And the problem is, even though much of this science is improving at a rapid pace, much of it is not directed towards anything we could call good and with any reason that we could call rational. The real science, which does exist, may be just reserved for the elites, for a small number of people who use it for themselves and use it to maintain their own power. Scientism is increasingly associated with transhumanism, the idea that we can physically change our bodies artificially, change what it means to be human, to the point that we could be like androids or perhaps download our consciousness onto a computer. Only in a worldview that thinks of a human in terms of neurons, electric pulses, and data could such a ridiculous idea be taken seriously. A society like this will come crashing down in flames. Hasta luego, amigos!